Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of our Global Symposium on Project Management and Leadership. I can't believe it's already day two, but that means we are having a lot of fun and learning at the same time. It gives me a lot of pressure to introduce Jeffrey Thompson for our speaking engagement today. Jeffrey comes with a lot of knowledge. He's an accomplished dynamic certified project manager, PMP, with also background in Six Sigma, project management, agile, scaled agile framework, and many other things at this point. He has over 30 years of experience and has proven effectiveness with successful implementation in many industries, in many companies. He has a lot to share at this point, so I will give the floor to Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, and Thompson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Hold on. Before I even get started, I want to make everybody know that we will be using a Slido for our engagement. I'll put the information about Slido as Dr. Thompson is getting ready to move forward with his presentation. Use the Slido for the engagement and not the chat forum here at this point for this session alone. With that, I'll give the floor back to you, Dr. Thompson.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for attending this session. So in this session, I'll be talking about psychological safety. And before I get to that, I'll be sharing a little bit about Agile and diversity, equity, and inclusion as we go through the presentation. So feel free to use the Slido as we go through the session. We're going to be using it for interactive polls, but also for the Q&A. So the idea is, if one of you has similar questions, instead of each of you typing your own question, you can vote up or like a question. So we'll take the more popular question first, as it were. So let's look at our agenda. So in our agenda, I will be starting off by sharing some context, and then we'll talk about Agile, just level set to make sure that we're all on the same page, understanding the difference between Agile and traditional project management. We'll do a little bit of level setting in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Then I'll share the relevance of both to psychological safety, share a call to action, and then take your questions. So let's talk a little bit about my history. So I started off in 1989 as a junior project engineer. I also call myself accidental project manager because I didn't really understand what project management meant. They just gave me work, I did it. So here's this young guy, did his bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering, starting to work at the brewery in Kingston, Jamaica. They put me on a project. Yeah, you look like a bright guy. Here you go in terms of working on a brewer's expansion where I installed transformers and worked on refrigeration systems. I also got involved in a project to install reverse osmosis water treatment plant, also upgrade our refrigeration system at the facility. And then in the last 2 years, I got involved in SAP implementation. And that blew my mind. I wanted to do more. So having worked 10 years at the brewery, I said, okay, I figure I had a good handle on project management. I wanted to come to Canada to work. However, when I checked what the requirements were for people working in project management, I came across the acronym PMP. So I had to discover what that was and eventually got my certification before coming to Canada. And it helped me to get my role at Apotex Pharmaceutical in the IT department, working on SAP implementation, installing scientific applications, as well as installing a Microsoft project server for the company. So you'll notice I'm mentioning Waterfall throughout. So I also applied my PMP in working at Maple Leaf Foods, where I got involved with strategic projects that use Six Sigma methodology to generate savings for the company. We also got involved in expanding the distribution network as well as a manufacturing network by installing distribution centers and also manufacturing facilities. After leaving Maple Leaf Foods, worked at Grupo Bimbo in their IT department, connecting their Oracle business system to their supply chain using interfaces so that the supply chain systems could use interface and feed into the Oracle business system that they had. So after 6 months working at Grupo Bimbo, went to OLG, got into using the knowledge I had in project management and process improvement to support OLG. And then now I'm in the financial area, and I now transitioned, well, 7 years ago, I transitioned to TD Bank, where I'm still using my PMP certification. But TD, being a 160-year-old company, wanted to be able to deliver to their customers at market speed and not at bank speed. So in order to do that, they embraced Agile. So I got my CSM, Certified Scrum Master certification, a couple of SAFe certifications, as well as my Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master certification. And that allowed me to not only work with individual Agile project teams called pods at TD, but also I'm able to apply this knowledge to work with 8 Agile teams at one time in what we call TD scale Agile environment. So that's a bit of my work history to now. I've also had volunteer experience. I've been volunteering with or member of PMI Toronto chapter from 2000, whereas even worked as or volunteered as the president for a couple of years. I'm currently a board member of York Region Alliance of African Canadian Communities, supporting the Black communities in York Region in Canada, member of the Black Employee Network at TD, BPTN, Black Professionals in Technology, Canadian Associated Urban Financial Professionals, as well as Black North Initiative. And I share this because I want to give you a sense of where I'm coming from in terms of the diversity space. So let's see how familiar you are with Agile. So you have the link to Slido, so you can either go to slido.com and enter the number that is on the screen. You can also use the QR code on the right, or use the link that's in the chat. So I'm going to switch over, and I'm going to start the first poll. So the first poll is asking your familiarity with Agile. So I started the poll. So please go into the poll and share with me, or share with us, your experience. Okay, nice. So I'm just checking on my other screen here how things are going with the poll. So far, we have 1 vote. Any other takers?
Which means the system is working.
Nice. So give you a minute or so to, because I know sometimes it takes a while to navigate to Slido. So maybe we'll give everybody another minute or so to put in their votes. So far, 2 votes. Anybody else? Give you a few more seconds. Eight more seconds. All right, thank you for those who, okay, got a couple more. All right, thank you very much for all that participated. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so thank you very much for participating. So we see that there's some people that have less experience of Agile than the other, but let's level set so that everybody's on the same page in terms of Agile. So back in February 2001, there were about 17 people that got together to create we now know as the Agile Manifesto. So in the Agile Manifesto, the values that they spoke about was the importance to get improvements on the way projects are executed. The Agile Manifesto suggests that we should be focused more on individuals and interactions over process and tools we use in our project management delivery. We should be focused on delivering working software as opposed to spending a lot more time on comprehensive documentation. We should be looking or favoring customer collaboration over the contract negotiations. And finally, we should be responding to change rather just blindly following a plan. So as you'll notice from the Agile Manifesto, there's more of a focus on individuals, more of a focus on delivering value, more on a focus of having that close collaboration to enable successful delivery and also be responding to change. A lot of us are familiar with that expression that the only thing constant is change. So we need to make sure that we have that responsiveness as we look to deliver value to our customers. So let's look at what does Agile mean in terms of design and deploy. So many of us are familiar with the traditional predictive or waterfall model, where we start with our requirements and we spend weeks and months on that. Then after we get a sign off on the requirements, we spend weeks and months on design. And after this design is signed off, then we implement, then we do testing, and then we go into maintenance. But each one of those stages take a long time to get through. And it favors only going in one direction, going down. Going back up is hard because then you have to go through change control and a lot of other bureaucracy to get that change happening. Agile, on the other hand, and this is the Scrum way of delivery, you're starting with some elements of the backlog. You're doing analysis, design, define, design, test, and then deploy. And that's over a set time box period. And depending on your group that's working in that Agile framework, that fixed time box period could be 1 week across all the sprints that you're doing. It could be 2 weeks, it could be 4, but it is a set time box period that you're doing delivery. And it's a lot shorter window than what we would have in terms of waterfall and the delivery with waterfall. So then moving on to the triangle, many of us who are especially familiar with the waterfall are familiar with this iron triangle, as some people call it, where the scope is fixed and the schedule and costs are changing to deliver that scope, right? And that's what you're delivering. There's no change to it. With the Agile Triangle, it's inverted. The schedule and the cost, so you have a time box, which is a schedule. The cost is a certain spend envelope that you're given, and the scope is variable. So you're focused on delivering within a certain time box, spending only the money that you're given, and you're modifying the scope in terms of delivering the value that the customer wants. In terms of process comparison, with waterfall process, you're logging this big body of work. Only, and that's the requirements that signed off, put in a safe, and nobody can go in, only a few people know the combinations to get at the requirements to change it. Whereas on the Agile side, you're looking at bite-sized sections, something that's small, manageable by the team to give a quicker delivery, quicker return to the customer. In terms of the project information system, it's taking that big set of requirements and laying it out. And you're not looking to start that project until everything is laid out and everybody has signed off on what's going to be delivered. Agile uses a software similar like Jira and others that are looking at how to manage those bite-sized portions through that fixed time boxing and giving that quicker delivery. So you're going through sprint after sprint, delivering or committing to smaller deliveries. In terms of lessons learned versus retrospective, in Waterfall, there's an elaborate process in terms of doing the lessons learned where you're identifying, documenting, analyzing, storing, and retrieving. In many cases, if the lesson learned is done, it tends to be done at the end of the project, and the benefit that you get from the lessons learned may not be realized within the current project, but it's for the next project that's similar to the current project that you're working on, so that lessons learned benefits the next project that's similar. Whereas within Agile, the retrospective is focused more on at the end of a time box period, whether that be a week, 2 weeks, or 4 weeks, the team is sitting down and evaluating what they've delivered, what they have completed. They're looking at what worked well, what didn't work as well, what ideas did they get, what did they learn, and what questions they have. all this to create action plans that will be folded into the next time box period. So you're learning, growing, and improving with each time box period that you're working. So let's also look at delivery comparison. So with the traditional waterfall, you're getting the requirements, you're telling the customer, don't talk to us, we'll let you know when we've delivered, and you're delivering weeks, months down the line, and customer hopefully will be happy with what you've delivered. Whereas Agile is looking at giving some immediate delivery, where you're delivering something workable to the customer. So in this example, the customer wants wheels to get around, something to take them around. So you give them a skateboard. It's functional, may not be as fast, but it's a lot faster than walking. Then they say, well, it's not exactly what I want. So you give them like a scooter, something that has handles, they can go faster, they have better control over how they're managing it, but still not quite there. So then you give them a bicycle. Bicycle is faster, you have a lot more maneuverability, you get there a lot faster than the previous deliverables that you gave them. Then next, you say, okay, customer wants something faster, here's a motorbike. It gets you around faster, but maybe not as protective. And finally, you give them the car. So as you can see, the customer is getting happier as they go along, but they always have something that they can use, something that's usable. And that's one of the primary focus of Agile. So let's look at the state of Agile. So there's an organization that has been polling companies that are using the other Agile methodology just to see how they're doing and what benefits they're getting from their Agile transformation, their Agile implementation. So this is a couple of questions that I pulled from the report that came out last year, 2022, which was the 15th edition of running or doing that state of Agile assessment. So the first question on the left is, has the implementation of Agile positively impacted each of the following areas within your company? And you can see the top areas on the left are, managing change, visibility, getting that alignment between business and IT, delivery, talking about productivity, and team morale. So you're looking at those, and those are high values. So they're getting a lot out of it. Then let's look at the question on the right. On the right, how does your organization measure success of Agile transformation? So they're looking at customer user satisfaction as high values, business value, business objective achieved, on-time delivery, quality, and productivity. So companies that implement Agile, and this is, I believe, is at least 2,500 companies that they got full information from, are showing that they're benefiting from the Agile transformation that they're undertaking. So let's go back to the poll. And we're switching from Agile now to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. So I'm going to start poll number 2. And this poll is looking for one word or a couple words from you to say, when you think or hear DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, what comes to mind? What are the thoughts that come to you when you think of diversity, equity, inclusion? And hopefully everyone has the link. I see that we have now 10 participants, so hopefully everybody has the link there. I see 2 participants sharing. So if you don't have the link, please let Sherman know in the chat and he'll share with you again. You can either use a QR code here, or you can go to slido.com and enter the number, or you can use the link. Hopefully that's available in the chat for you. So, oops, no. Okay. Feeling heard, okay. So we'll give another minute or two. See, 3 participants are typing now. Belongingness, respect. So one more participants typing. Celebrating differences, trust. I like it. Fair, business agility. Nice. So maybe I'll give maybe another 20 seconds or so for people to enter their thoughts. And thank you for all who have participated thus far. I appreciate it. Respect, okay. So another 5 seconds. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone who participated. So we got that information locked in. So let's dive into the topic. So some of you hopefully would have participated yesterday or from other means have familiarity with these words, but let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. So diversity is looking at uniqueness, looking at representation that exists at multiple levels. Equity, I want to spend a little more time on because some people think equality is the same as equity. And if you look at that image on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see that there is a difference. If you look at the left side of the image, you'll see what equality means, where if we're looking at, or if we interpret the outcome to be everyone being able to see over the fence to watch the game, you can see that equality does not lead to everyone getting what they need in terms of the outcome. So if you look at the right, you can see everyone has what they need to get to the outcome necessary to see over the fence and watch the game. So the person to the left in the right side image does not need a carton to stand on. They have all they need to get to the outcome. Whereas the individual to the right needs two cartons to stand on because they are vertically challenged. They can't see over the fence without having that support. So I invite you, when you think about equity, to think about the equal opportunity for outcomes. And that's usually important. So as we go to inclusion, inclusion focuses on participation. And if we're thinking about a project environment, we want to make sure that all persons on the project feel heard. Then as a further development on that, people to have that sense of belonging, sense of comfort in terms of speaking up. And we'll speak a bit more about belonging when we come to the psychological safety. So let's talk about intersectionality. When we think about ourselves, we are all unique in a number of different ways. Unfortunately, people use the differences or uniqueness of individuals against them, as opposed to welcoming the fact that we're all unique and we all have a different perspective that we can bring based on different cultures, different sexual orientation, ethnicity, etc. If we want people to perform well on our projects within our work environment, we need to have them, as the term says, bring their whole self to work. However, we need to appreciate their intersectionality to allow that to happen. So what could prevent people from sharing? It could be unconscious biases. So unconscious bias, we'll talk about 5 biases. And the first one is affinity bias, where we're tending to want to have people around us that have similar backgrounds. We're more comfortable sharing and relating to people that have similar backgrounds. But as the world gets more and more diverse, there are not always going to be people with similar backgrounds with us. And we need to be mindful of that. Then we have perception bias that speaks to stereotypes. We see a situation, we see an individual or individuals and make assumptions about them and based on what we think we know about them. Then confirmation bias is that we tend to hold on to preconceived notions as opposed to looking at the facts, and that could lead us to more acceptance. Intuition bias has to do with gut feel. We have a certain visceral reaction when we see certain individuals and we hold on to that, even though it may not be fact-based. Groupthink, when I reflect on groupthink, I think about the Challenger explosion. So some of you may or may not have heard about the groupthink that led to the Challenger disaster, where there were a group of engineers that realized that the shuttle was not in the correct state based on the environment and the freezing that took place. The shuttle wasn't in a good condition to be sent into orbit or to be launched. However, the majority of the group pressured those individuals into silence, and they went ahead with the launch. And within seconds of the shuttle launching, it erupted, it exploded, and lives were lost. So we need to appreciate that there are biases that exist, and many of them may apply to us, and we need to have that awareness as we continue to interact with each other and with our project teams. So let's see how that can play out in terms of further looking at intersectionality as it relates to numbers. So these pie charts are from my dissertation, where I studied how the relationship between racial diversity in terms of Canadian company performance within companies that traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. As you can see, the majority of individuals are white males, followed by white females. Then you have visible minority males and visible minority females. So that's the makeup of most boards and the makeup of our executive leadership. And as you can see, that representation could impact how others are perceived, especially how minorities are perceived. So let's dive into that further. One of the things that I discovered as I did my dissertation was that the population of Canada is becoming more and more diverse. So we're at 2023, so we're about 25% of the population being visible minorities. The projection is by 2036, 35% or more of the population are going to be of a visible minority community, represent the visible minority community. So that's something that we have to keep in mind as we continue to relate to each other. Because here's how it plays out. When you look at pay, some Canadian pay gaps, if you compare male workers to female workers, for each dollar that a male worker gets, the female workers get a percentage of that. So there's lack of pay equity for females, which are not. And the interesting thing is, females tend to be in the majority within Canada. In terms of visible minority compared to non-visible minority, for each dollar that non-visible minority gets, visible minorities get less. And it's a similar thing if we look at comparing non-Aboriginal to Aboriginal people. So these intersectionalities, we need to have that awareness of as we continue to deal with each other. So let's do another poll. Poll number 3. And this is a relatively easy one. Do you believe that the majority is always right? What are your thoughts? So we'll give maybe another 20 seconds or so, since it's a relatively easy survey. So you have 7 participants. Thank you very much for participating. Another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll close it. All right, thank you very much for your participation. So let's delve into that whole idea of, and start with lean agile leadership. So based on Scale Agile, people either have fixed mindset or growth mindset. So on the left, you see some of the thoughts that people with fixed mindset would have. I can either do it or I can't. Failure is a limitation of my abilities. I'm either good at it or I'm not. So if you think about it, that's kind of negative, kind of self-defeating. I hopefully most of us don't get trapped in those type of negative thoughts about ourselves, about certain situations. The view is to be more successful and to be able to perform better on our projects and within our organizations. We want to lean into the growth mindset, and our leadership should be encouraging, demonstrating, and supporting the growth mindset, where people are thinking, I like to try new things. They have that comfort where they're inspired by the success of others. They believe that their efforts and attitudes determine their abilities, and also that things like feedback is constructive. That's the sort of mindset that we need to have in order to continue to be successful, to manage, as some people term the VUCA time that we live in. So how does that all pull together in terms of creating psychological safety? So based on HR profiling solutions, there are 4 stages to psychological safety. First part is inclusion safety. So if we go back to, we're seeing an increasingly diverse population, we need to think that how can we ensure that employees feel safe? Because if we're going with the thought only of the majority and not accepting some of the views of the minorities, we may not be creating that inclusive environment where employees feel included and feel safe in that way. We also want folks to have that learner safety. We want employees to be able to continue to develop, I should say, their growth mindset, where they feel safe learning and growing, asking questions, open to feedback, and helping them to improve as they go. We also want employees to have that contribution safety, where they feel safe including their ideas. Because as we innovate, we need to ensure that we're not locking on and holding on to that fixed mindset of the past. Hopefully some of you would have been here for the keynote speech where he talked about the success of and failures of some companies based on having that fixed mindset and not developing that growth mindset. We also want to have, finally, the challenger safety, where people can challenge the status quo to lead to positive change. So all these stages, so we're pulling together what we're talking about in terms of agile, diversity, equity, inclusion, and using those to lead to developing that psychological safe environment. So how can that play out or potentially play out within the work environment? So Fist for Five voting. So some of you may not be familiar with Fist for Five voting, but within Scale Agile, we are planning for quarters, or we're planning quarter increments where we're committing to delivery or committing some items that we're going to deliver in quarters. So as we get to the end of one quarter, we'll get together as a larger team and agree on what we're going to commit to for the upcoming quarter. But as we come to the end of our planning event, we'll ask everyone to share with us or share with the broader team what is their feeling on the commitment. How comfortable are they? Do they believe there's no way it's going to happen? Or are they in total agreement? Do they have that confidence that we're able to achieve what we're committing to for the upcoming quarter? Or are they at a lower level of agreement? If there are, we want folks to feel comfortable sharing what they truly feel, because then we can help them with identifying what risk they're seeing and also making sure that they have all the support to remove that risk. Some of the risks and impediments that they are identifying may be easy to overcome, or we may need to escalate to higher levels of management in order to resolve some of those concerns that they have. Some of you may be appreciating the expression that sometimes people report something that's flaming red as a cherry, but by the time they get up to the executives, it becomes a watermelon. And as you know, the watermelon has a thin green skin and there's a lot of red inside. So it's not necessarily the same level of issue or situation that needs to be addressed that gets reported to the higher up executives and senior managers, which is a recipe for disaster and could explain why some initiatives are not successful. Moving on to our final poll, I ask you to share what are your thoughts on sharing uncomfortable news. So let's say you find a situation on your projects or in your work environment that a bad situation that you need to now share with someone more senior to you. How comfortable are you sharing that news? Oh, you're very comfortable. And it helps others grow. Yeah, that's true. So maybe we'll give another minute for you to reflect and share. All right, some people are comfortable. Provide data evidence. That's very, very important. Okay, someone is uneasy. Okay. Stronger feeling of comfort. Good to hear, good to hear. Okay. Increased opportunity, learning opportunity, potential to innovate with evidence and suggestion. Yeah, that's always a good idea. If you're sharing something, especially if it's uncomfortable, evidence and data is important. Positive spin. Now, well, let's be careful about that positive spin. That may end up being a cherry that becomes a watermelon. So let's be careful about that. All right, I think we've gotten to critical mass here. So most of you are saying that you're comfortable. So thank you very much for participating. All right. So having said all of that, I wanted to leave you with a call to action. So in this slide, I wanted to share with you, and we may not have time because to share the video, but hopefully you'll get the presentation and are able to look at the links. If not, I can post it in the chat afterwards, or you can look it up. This video have been going around the internet, especially around, after George Floyd's death. A number of videos were created, including this one that went the rounds that starts with, say, inclusion starts with I. So instead of waiting for others to do something about inclusion or your company, etc., we all can be inclusive. we can focus on what we can do as individuals to make others feel inclusive. And that's where I think we should be at. Instead of waiting for others to do that, let us think about how we can take small actions to lead to change. An example I want to pivot to is Darnella Fraser. Many of you would not have known about this young lady. She was 17 years old when she witnessed George Floyd being murdered right in front of her. But she had power. She had her phone that she could record a video, and she had the power to post. And that post went worldwide. It went viral. And it brought into mind or brought into focus something people have been talking about for years. But she had the receipts. She had the evidence that she could share with the world that anti-Black racism existed, that some members of the police were killing African Americans or people from of African ancestry. But even though this was being shared with many people in many forums, there was always pushback from the majority. No, not going to listen to you, minority. We, the majority, knows best. But her video changed the conversation so that we can have more productive conversation and get to the right changes that need to happen. However, we can't rely on that. We still need to do more. And one of the things that we need to be conscious of, and I'm thankful to this video put out by PwC, is that we all have blind spots. We all have things that we don't know, but others know. And that's where we need to be open to feedback. Some of you may have heard of Johari's window, where it looks at what we know compared to what others know. And for those things that are part of what they call open arena, we know it, others know it, so that's fair game. Everybody knows, just exposed to everything. But again, there are some things that others know that we don't. And we need to have that openness, and we need to remove our biases and have that receptiveness to hear that feedback so that we can continue to learn, grow, and develop. So just wanted to give you those call to action. And then finally, wanted to also leave you with some information that if you wanted to explore more about diversity, equity, inclusion, and agile teams, there's a survey available through Scrum Alliance that you can use to further your knowledge as well to help you appreciate that. So that's it for my presentation. I'm now open for questions, and I'll go back to Slido and see if there are any questions. Come on. I guess I'm not seeing any questions here.
It may be that people are not fully aware of the Slido Q&A capability.
Okay.
So again,
right.
I open the floor to everybody. Please ask the questions here. Put them on the Q&A on the Slido side. If you have any questions, we will be able to address them. Dr. Thompson, it was an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Well done. And every time you talked about the group thing, the Johari window, these things are all nuggets that you are throwing on the side that enrich the presentation, enrich your content. I really appreciate that. Wonderful thought.
Okay, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I think there's one question that came up on Slido. So let me share my screen again.
Yes, there is one question. What was exciting to you when you got to work in SAP?
Okay, what was exciting to me when I got to work in SAP is that we were looking at improving the organization. So when you think about SAP, SAP has this belief that you should enter data once and be able to use it multiple times. So when I was getting ready to, or when I was part of the project, one of the things that we had to do was to do process documents. So we need to understand the as-is process and then overlay the as-is process to how would SAP work on that as-is process. And it broke down silos, because the way I'll describe it is, before SAP, people would load their catapult in their part of the kingdom and they'll launch information to another area of the business, and that area of the business would take that information and put it in another format and then load their catapult and put it on. As opposed to, after SAP, you'd enter the data once, and that same data is available throughout the whole organization. So it's really transformational change, and organizations can't operate in the same way that they did before SAP as they did after SAP is implemented. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, I'm seeing a few more questions come up. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for that response. There is another one that said, like, you mentioned that you were an accidental project manager. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that I didn't have, at the time, any formal training in project management. I didn't have that certification. I didn't even know that the certification existed. So it was only just before I came to Canada that I realized that out there was a body called Project Management Institute that would certify project managers in that area. And I realized that, coming from an island, Jamaica, it's hard to demonstrate that you really have that appreciation of project management unless you are certified. And coming to an environment like Canada, certification speaks volumes to what you're able to do. So that's pretty much why I consider myself an agile project manager.
Very good.
So
Very good.
I move from accidental to certified project manager.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. Thanks for that information here. There's a couple more questions, Dr. Thompson. Thanks for a great presentation, very informative. How much leadership is required for project managers when they don't have authority? This is one of the classic questions that people ask. So
Yeah.
project managers without authority, how much leadership is required? So,
well, that's where we can influence. And this is where building relationships are important. Because even if you don't have the specific authority, you would want to spend time cultivating relationships with those who have the authority. Because again, you have to sort of take yourself out of the equation and say, yes, I may not be the person that can do something, but maybe I can escalate the issue to someone who can actually take action. Hopefully that addressed that question.
Good. Yep. You're as I heard you say about relationship building. You know, one of the important domain about project management is also about stakeholder engagement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people, how they positively, negatively influence, or positively or negatively impact the actual project objectives. So that's definitely a good point about that. There is one more question. You are right about the VUCA. How much risk management and ethics thoughts are required in today's world, and how they connect with DEI? That's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. There's a lot more risks that have come up, and as you mentioned, VUCA, meaning volatility, uncertainty, complexity. So the world is more volatile than it's ever been, because there's a lot more change. There's a lot more uncertainty because the thoughts that we had, or the views that we had yesterday, don't necessarily apply to today. And basically, we need to continue to address this ambiguity, and we need to manage these risks and also look at how we can do it in an ethical way. Because there's a tendency that we have to want to take shortcuts. and shortcuts may not be the best way to go. So this is where I think ethics should help us to appreciate, what we should be doing and sticking to that. How they connect to diverse equity inclusion, I believe, is that there is a lot of group things. So just going back to biases, people have preconceived notion of others. So, they have their own view of varying groups of people, and they act on, their gut feel rather than being fact-based. A lot of media and other sources may expose things about individuals that may not be accurate. And we need to, even though there's a lot of volatility and loss going on, I think we need to spend adequate time doing appropriate research and making sure that we have all the facts right about individuals and making sure people do feel that equity. Because again, if we look at equity and equality, people believe equality is the same as equity. And as we just discussed, equity is different. Especially if you're not from, say, Canadian culture, you're not used to doing certain things. You need to learn. However, not everybody has the patience to say, you know what, I know you're from a different culture. Here's how we do things in Canada. How does that reconcile with how you see the world? So hopefully that addressed the questions. If there's additional follow-up, happy to discuss.
Definitely. At this point, I'm not seeing any additional questions at this point. I'm just checking the chat window also, the Zoom chat, just in case somebody asked a question there. No question. Wonderful presentation. Thank you. Very informative and very helpful. Thank you. It seems like there are no questions at this point, so I'll maybe wait.
Hold on. I see another question that came up in the chat.
Okay. Yes, New Zealand. Correct. How can Agile teams assess and measure the effectiveness of their efforts in promoting psychological safety and DEI approaches?
I think there are a number of ways that they can do that. One of the ways can be surveys in terms of getting that feedback. I know some companies do put a lot of importance to getting honest feedback from their employees, and they have, because some companies put that necessary emphasis to say, hey, I do want to hear you, and we have that openness to hear. So that's where I believe our leaders have a role to play in terms of that effectiveness. And again, we talked about it a while ago in terms of sharing uncomfortable news. In terms of this area, this is diversity, equity, inclusion, or lack of support of diversity, equity, inclusion. I would put into that category of uncomfortable news. And this is where it makes sense to ensure that you're documenting certain things that you want to speak about so that you're fact-based about it, as opposed to just relying on too much on emotions to share that information. So that's how I view it. Hopefully that addresses the question.
Right. There is an additional comment relating to that. So employee scores is what you are suggesting. Is that?
Yes, that's part of what I'm suggesting. And again, part of it is that some companies have that willingness, but others may not. And we need to be prepared in both situations. And that's why I think it's important to document whatever that uncomfortable situation is, so that even if you can't deal with it within the company, if you have to, hopefully you don't have to do this, but if you have to get lawyers or something like that involved, then you want to make sure that you have the evidence to support what you're saying. Fact base is so important. Having the data is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And just to add to your point, there are employee scores, and there are also a lot of team health instruments, survey instruments that exist. They are validated instruments. one commercial instrument that I can think of is Agility Health Radar, and I'm not trying to promote anything here. Okay, disclaimer. Agility Health is a means by which the team assess themselves in terms of their effectiveness and their health, physical, mental state of health, to be able to move forward the strategic objectives and stuff like that, and the alignment with the strategic objectives and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
that's another great instrument to use. And again, disclaimer: I'm not promoting, I'm not suggesting any instrument here. That being said, I don't think there are any other questions on my.
But if you don't mind, I want to build on what you said because
Sure.
when I worked at Maple Leaf Foods, I use Six Sigma, and we tend to use the MAKE method where we do define, measure, analyze, improve, and control.
Right.
So we realized as a company that we're going to spend thousands of dollars working on projects, and we didn't want to lose that money. And that's why each and every improvement that we got or we delivered on, we did not finish off that body of work unless we put in a control plan.
Right.
So that control plan, if you want to think about driving from one location to another, you have to turn the steering wheel to avoid crashing and to make sure that you navigate to where you're going, because you can't just go in a straight line. And then also, if you need to course correct, you need to turn the steering wheel. So for agile transformation or anything you're doing, whether it be DEI, etc., there needs to be some control plan in place so that if things start going in the wrong direction, you can take some corrective action to course correct to bring it back to where it needs to be.
Yes, absolutely. Can agree with that. If you don't, what would you say? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you need to have a process in place. The plans are not relevant, but planning is. So you need to have some element of how I would, proactively address them and reactively address them. And, in the regulated world, we call about CAPA, corrective action, preventive actions, and how we move forward and stuff like that. So absolutely, I couldn't agree more with you, Dr. Thompson. So absolutely. Are you seeing any more questions on the
Let me just double
Slido?
check. I need to double check Slido quickly.
Yes, I
I
just
don't
moved
see
to
any
the.
in Slido, and I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So I'll
Yes,
assume that I've adequately addressed the questions. And thank you everyone for participating. I enjoyed presenting. Hopefully you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thompson. Really nice to have this today kicked off with your presentation. Really appreciate that. And for those of you that are in the room, we will be starting our next session in about 15 minutes, 10:15. So thank you again, Dr. Thompson. We will wait for the next section to begin. Thank you very much again.
All right. Take care.
Take care.